All right, this is Chris Rowe with Encounter Ministries. We're back again with Hope in the Middle of Chaos. And our guest today is Jeremy Paden. Most importantly to me, a lifelong friend, at least since my 11th birthday when he had a bowl haircut and I still had hair. Jeremy is now a professor of Spanish and Latin American literature at Transylvania University in Kentucky. He's an author and a poet. He has a book coming out called Under the Ocelot Sun. And I've just invited him here today, one, because I trust Jeremy's heart. He's a father and a husband, father of two, and I want to hear from him about the different ways he is handling hope in the middle of chaos. So, Jeremy, let's just start with that. Tell me a little bit about yourself that I missed. Like, where are you, and anything about maybe your book, and then we'll move into the deeper questions.
Well, I mean, as you said, we're in Lexington, Kentucky, and in terms of, well, where am I? As in terms of where where I am.
I just meant where are you geographically?
Oh, sorry, where I am physically, geographically. We're in Lexington, Kentucky, and we're on the southern fringe of the city. We're still within the city limits. One of the advantages that's really sort of provided us is we're about a 7 to 10 minute walk from a park that has hiking trails and mountain bike trails, and so one of the things that I've really been able to enjoy is getting out and walking the dog by myself.
What kind of dog?
From others. And right, it's good to move, and it's good to move through in the outdoors, through nature. It's good to watch flowers come up, trees green, and to remember that while there are ways in which our own life is stopped, the world is still moving in the way the world should move, that spring is still here and doing what spring should do.
That's good. I failed to mention also that you're a missionary kid, that you grew up in Central America and the Dominican. He's one of the few people who, when he makes dinner and takes a nice Instagram photo, that my wife is jealous of generally. So didn't want to miss that. Beauty is something I think that's important. One of the things, as Jeremy said, just seeing life grow, that God's still at work, that the kindness of God didn't rip away beauty, nor did one of the assumptions that I wanted to start with is, and I've said this at the beginning of most of our videos, there's a larger story being told than just coronavirus and COVID-19. We're part of a much larger story, that God's not mad at us and he didn't cause this. Certainly that there are things that we should be responsible with, but ultimately that there is an evil one, and he is set against, he wants to capitalize on this opportunity by breeding fear. And we want to have some informed caution, but not give way to fear. And so, Jeremy, how in this time with your family, with your students, with your walks with the dog, are you finding hope in the middle of the chaos?
Well, I mean, I guess before, and I will talk some about hope and finding that, and some of the things that we've done, but I also want to say that grief is real.
Amen. Yeah, that's good.
And I think that we have to acknowledge that and not shove the grief away. I mean, and it comes up in at different moments and in strange ways, and there can be a lot of different kinds of grief. The the sort of bodily grief of not being able to hug and touch people beyond one's immediate family if one is with them. And there are certainly those who because of living on their own
Yeah,
can't hug or shake hands with anyone. And so I think while looking for hope, I don't think that looking for hope or even being hopeful is should be understood as being the opposite of recognizing and acknowledging grief. That actually hope and grief are emotions that can happen simultaneously and and work together.
absolutely. The first time that ever hit me, um, Jeremy's been friends with me long enough to know my father passed away when I was 29. I was 2 weeks away from marrying my wife, and I remember getting off at our exit and thinking, okay, there was this attack of grief and hope, both, because I had two very different things going on that I thought one had to defeat the other. And I just felt the presence of God in my heart just give me the freedom to allow both to exist. The joy that I was about to begin a new life with Jennifer, and the desperate grief that continued for months, and still, really, here we are, 17 years later. It still exists, not in opposition to the joy or the hope, but certainly simultaneously. So thank you. Yeah, that's very, very good. Good insight.
And yeah, I mean, so there are things then, one of the things that I've done, just, and part of it is because I like poetry and I read poetry, and I've turned to translating um, uh, a Peruvian poet, Cesar Vallejo, and I'm doing a poem a day of a certain collection of his that actually are sort of deeply painful poems.
Mm,
They're poems about sadness and about grief and him grappling with mortality. Um, and one reason that I'm doing that and then and posting those on Facebook is because there's it helps channel those feelings, and it gives me a place and a site um, to deeply feel that sadness. Um, but it lets me take that sadness and do something with it, and do something with it that I think does line up with beauty, in the sense that um, looking for the right rhythm of a language, in language, or the right image, the right turn of phrase, can lead to wonder. And
mm,
so, and wonder is a wonderful thing because because it opens us up to the world, right?
yeah.
There's a way in which being, I mean, if you are in a place where you are a shelter in place, um, where you're in a shelter in place situation, what you feel is your world is getting smaller. Um, Finding a way to practice wonder and understanding amazement, um, as something that you can, that is something that can be practiced in terms of turning and looking at the world um, in ways that surprise you, is a way of opening up, in a hopeful way.
Yeah, Mike Yaconelli, I think, wrote a book called Dangerous Wonder. And he mentions in the foreword, it's one of the most powerful stories I've heard him tell, about that transition in his life at about 7 or 8, when he had tied the towel around his neck and would jump off of, the shed or whatever it was. And for those few seconds he was flying, there was some time in that 7, 8, 9-year-old period where he realized he couldn't fly. And it was the loss of wonder. And that steals any, I mean, you said surprise when you were talking about wonder. Like we're rarely surprised. One, I think we're so focused on what we're looking at. Like right now, we're looking at the crisis. We're not looking at, and we are looking maybe at others, but even our view of helping others is through the view of crisis. And so the idea that we could be looking for wonder, that we could be open to beauty and being surprised, whether it's on a walk or through beauty for us, for Jennifer and myself, I guess it was 2 nights ago, we didn't want to watch anything on television. There was just too much. So I flipped YouTube on, and I just began to flip through some of our favorite artists, and we listened to a little bit of Dave Matthews Band and a little bit of Dead and Company, and ended up on Amos Lee for an hour and a half. And just this playlist that somebody else had, most of it live, which we prefer. And we kind of had our own living room concert unplanned. And we're surprised by how much, Jennifer said, that's exactly what I needed. And we were surprised by how much our souls needed beauty. And again, not just in opposition to grief and fear, but in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about. Let's go to the cooking thing. You said you're a cook out of you're the family cook. If you want to follow Jeremy, what's your Instagram? Let's build your Instagram here. What's your Instagram handle? Do you remember?
My handle is Jeremy Day, and that's DAE. So it is, my Instagram handle is at JEREMYDAE.
And I promise you will leave hungry, but it's fresh. Just tell us about when you do. I know you don't post like your half-eaten peanut butter and jelly sandwich ones. Well, you did actually do that recently.
Well, yes, that was a way of acknowledging not every meal is a creation.
That's good. But tell us just a little bit about why you do that, because you're not a show off. So tell me a little bit about what you do with food for your family, and even when you're taking pictures of it.
Well, I mean, and really the amount of food photography on my Instagram since the COVID event has really sort of kicked up, and part of that is, I guess in the last 2 days I've seen on Facebook people posting landscape pictures so we can travel the world while staying in place, and really it was early on. I mean, when our kids, that Monday that our kids didn't go to school, so they haven't been going to school for the past 2.5 weeks. I thought, well, you know what? I'm also staying at home. What we will do, I mean, we're not going to be doing our spring break trip. We will probably not, and the spring break trip was going to see the grandparents in Asheville. We're probably not going to do what we normally do during the summer, which is we try to go camping at a national park in the lower 48, just so that they can experience all of the beauty that the country has to offer. So we're probably not going to be traveling. How can we travel? So I decided that I would try to turn most of the meals into some form of travel, and so that at the dinner table,
Great.
we would go traveling.
And so just give me an idea. So what were some of the meals, or where were they from?
Well, we've so far we went to one night I cooked Indian food, and so we went to and it was largely out of the Punjab region, which is in the northwest corner of India. So we did a chickpeas in a masala sauce, and we did a split pea with potatoes. We did rice, and I made some naan bread, and we did a chicken masala to go with that as well. Another night we went to sort of Korea and had bibimbap. And bibimbap is a typical kind of it's possibly Korea's most famous dish, but it's a typical sort of leftover. Um,
That's one of
it,
my favorites, and now I know I say it wrong.
it's a rice bowl that you just throw in various things, and so we did that one night. I made ramen. I did not make the noodles this from scratch though, but we made ramen. So we went to Japan. I grew up cooking or eating my mother's Italian food, and so my mom. Well, I was born in Italy, and my mom learned how to cook in Italy, and so I've grown up around home cooked Italian, and it's one of the things that I do. So we've actually been to Italy on a couple of occasions. Um, Made an artichoke lasagna one night, and another night made homemade gnocchi, which is a potato dumpling. Um, so yeah, so we're trying to travel the world while at the dinner table.
That's good. That's good. I want to ask you kind of two more major questions here. One, I know you've just re-engaged your students, and so you're having those interactions. What are you feeling and hearing kind of from them? How are our 20 somethings responding to this? And then I've got one more major question for you.
Well, I think at a small liberal arts college, they've come because they know it's going to be intimate. They've come because they know that they'll know each other and they'll live in community, and part of that expectation is the chance to live in community while learning. And as a professor at a small liberal arts college, I really do. Um, I think that life happens best in community. I think that wisdom is something that is learned in community. Um, in part because I think the difficulty, I mean, and this is going to be a sort of complaint a little bit about the presumption that we can do so much online. But when in community, you get to know people in a different way than if you're just interacting with them via cybernetic modes of communication, which in some ways keeps, I think, if you're a professor, it can keep you honest, and I think if you're a student and a professor, you can interact in ways that actually recognize each other's humanity. And my sense is they're all grieving that. They're missing being with their friends. They're missing the freedom of being able to pop in to office hours. They're missing having those downtimes where conversation happens and conversation that goes deep happens. And that's a lot harder to do when it's based through even a wonderful medium like Zoom, which is what I've been using now to have synchronous classes so that we can all see each other. But communication through Zoom, it can be stilted.
Sure.
When you have more than, two people talking.
Sure. Yeah. I had my birthday party on a Sunday night recently on Zoom, and it was great. We were able to have people together that might not have made it otherwise. But it's not the same as sitting on each other's couches.
Yeah.
We kick off our campus ministry worship and message tonight, and I'm hoping for it to be more of a conversation than it gets to be maybe when we have a traditional service. But again, I do know just from the group texts that are going around, the students at UAB are missing they're sorely missing the intimacy that happens. We're the smallest, or one of the smaller campus ministries on UAB's campus, and that intimacy absolutely is the conversations that happen long after I leave, and they're at the campus house until 1:30 in the morning talking about important and sometimes not important stuff. It's that connection that matters. So my last major question for you is, how does your faith and your faith background inform how you and your family are responding to the crisis that's at hand, not just, well, practically, emotionally, and spiritually?
Well, this is where, I mean, in terms of how we're responding, we're trying to have moments where we gather together and we center ourselves as a family. There's still a frustration, in part because, I mean, as you noted, I grew up the son of missionaries, and specifically, my dad was a medical missionary, which is about going out and doing things,
Right.
doing things for other people, and so much of how we know how to offer comfort, and so much of how we know how to care for others is by doing things with them and for them, but in their presence.
Right.
And because of the nature of this pandemic, and the desire to be responsible towards those who find themselves within the threatened demographic, so much of what we normally do to find and offer comfort and solace is taken from us.
Yeah.
I mean, I read, it was yesterday, I read a story of a community choir or a chorale up in Washington State. And this was right at the beginning of the pandemic, as when right at the beginning of when Seattle was becoming a true hotspot. And this was a chorale at a place that was about an hour and a half away from Seattle. The chorale gathered, and 45 members of a 60-person group now have coronavirus and have full-blown COVID. A handful of them are hospitalized. One or two of them have died. And so it feels particularly unjust.
Yeah.
That those things that give us meaning and hope, like getting together and singing,
Yeah,
with a group that loves to sing, are things that we can't do.
Sharing meals.
Yeah. And so honestly, as a family, we're still trying to figure out how to do that. Presumably, as a family at the moment, since we've essentially been in a kind of shelter in place for the past 3 weeks, we're good. Right. This is a virus that works on a 2-week cycle.
Right.
In terms, but anytime one leaves the house, one doesn't know. I mean, so we have, I mean, last week I did the Indian meal that I fixed was a meal that we shared with some family friends. Both of them are doctors and have been working very long hours. And yet all of that still feels insufficient.
Yeah, no, that's good. And even the injustice of beauty being the very mechanism that brings about death. It's a struggle. The way that our family is dealing with it, part of it is being outdoors as much as we can. We're blessed to have some woods behind our house. But probably the best and the hardest has been to actually have those conversations.
Yeah.
My kids are 9 and 12. They're particularly inquisitive and thoughtful. And so they're big, my kids call them big feelings, but they're big feelings.
Yeah.
Sometimes about specific things and sometimes about everything in general. And just that deep breath for me, that instead of wanting to get past it and through it, like it, we're parents, we got stuff to do. There's food to prepare and there's things to clean and there's work to be done. And I work from home, so this is not a break for me. And even attempting to have these conversations like this to share with the world, it does me no good to have this conversation with you if I can't have that conversation with my son. And so as a family, our faith is informing our conversations because we're able to talk about some things a little more deeply, even justice and beauty, with our kids. So go ahead, Jeremy.
So do you let those sort of bubble up and they happen organically, or are you setting certain times for the family to have them?
Both. We kind of have some rituals. I mean, one, family dinner is a pretty common ritual. I'm gone 2 nights a week with ministry restrictions, but only one of them really requires me to be gone at dinner. And so family dinner is a place that we do that. And then another one is we have a back patio that we sit on, and this has been, when it's not raining, great weather for that. And so we set aside time to actually have those conversations. They are bubbling up more often than we are setting them aside over the last few weeks. My son is having a little trouble sleeping, waking up and then not being able to go back to sleep. And so those are some of those moments where we're having to have those conversations. So it's both, and we probably would do better to even set aside more time. But the fact that I don't do the traveling around town that I normally do has given me a little more time at home to do that. So I would encourage both. I mean, I can't put off his feelings. I'm trying to say, or my daughters, trying to say yes when they ask for time to talk, and say yes then if I can. And then we have kind of our rituals as well. What about y'all?
Yeah, I mean, like in terms of, we always sit down and eat and we eat together, the main meal. Sundays are largely, and especially Sunday mornings are largely when we do things as a family, and that's a space to have those conversations. Early on, and our kids are older than yours. Our daughter is 15, and if she had her druthers, she would just not see us. Our son has just turned 12, and early on, with him especially, we did sit down and have a conversation. I want to say that it was within the first week of explaining what this virus was, explaining why it was that we were staying at home, and even sitting down and saying it is quite probable that when all this is said and done, we will have contracted it. Yeah. And that the point of these measures are not to avoid our contracting it or thinking that getting coronavirus is going to be a failure, but instead that what we're trying to do is to ensure that our hospitals don't become overburdened with people suffering from COVID to such an extent that they start having to make difficult decisions.
Right.
And so that was, and when we had that conversation and let him know, it's quite possible that we'll get it. That the point is not to get it. The point is to make sure that the healthcare system isn't overburdened, he became much less agitated.
Good. Good. Let's switch gears for a second. Are you is your book as such that you could share just a little bit about it with us real quick?
Oh yeah, no, this is the one of the books that well, I guess the book that he mentioned is this one. It's called Under the Ocelot Sun, and it's coming out um, this July, we hope. It's as you can see, it's an illustrated
Beautiful.
book. The illustrator is a Panamanian, and she graduated from our college about 2 years ago. And in terms of, I guess it's about maybe my fourth. It's my fourth collection of poems, though I wouldn't call this one a collection. It's a poem in English that's been also translated into Spanish. And like most of the poems that I end up writing, it's heavily, well, it's about Latin America. Latin America is where I grew up, and it's the world that I understand. And the poem itself is a mother telling her daughter stories of who she is, and stories of what the Honduras of her grandmother was like, as a way of letting her understand, this is the daughter, understand who she is and why it is that they joined the migrant caravan and are currently waiting at the Mexico-U.S. border.
That's good. That's real good. And when it is available, do you know how we'll be able to purchase that at that point?
Yeah, my presumption is it should be on Amazon, but also the I can send you, if you would like, the
Sure.
link. I mean, the publishing house already has a web page up for it,
Please
and
do.
I
I'll
could
put it in
send
the
that to you.
comments.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, do you want to give out your email address, or how would they do
Yeah.
that?
My email address is jpaden, so Jeremy Paden, at Transy, and that's TRANSY.edu. And
Because
that's
nobody can
short
spell
for,
Transylvania, right?
yes, Transylvania University. We were founded in 1780 when Kentucky was known as Transylvania County, and it was a county of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Wow. And am I allowed to mention the movie, or is that
Oh yeah, no, that would be fine.
American Animals? Wasn't that the name of it?
That was the name of the movie.
If you want to know a little interesting history of that happened in the last 10 years with Transylvania University, it's kind of a little thriller. You can stream on a lot of different places. Again, I'm Chris Rowe with Encounter Ministries. You can find us at encounterministriesonline.org. You can email me at chrisrowe32@gmail.com. That's just my lazy, easiest way of getting in touch with me. Jeremy, it's been more than a pleasure to do this. I'll be posting it here shortly, and I love you and thank you for joining us here.
Thank you for what you're doing.
Thanks, Jeremy. We'll continue this after I hit stop.
Okay.